In the vast, untamed heart of Africa, where the sun bleeds gold across the plains and the air hums with ancient life, one man's promise to a dying elephant becomes a battle for the soul of the wild. The breath of freedom follows Elias Mebeki, a wildlife conservationist, haunted by loss and driven by love, as he faces poachers, corruption, and the fragile line between justice and survival. Through storms, blood, and silence, he learns that freedom is not simply the absence of chains, but the courage to protect those who cannot speak. Inspired by real-world struggles across Africa's endangered landscapes, this story is both a tribute and a warning, a reminder that every heartbeat in the wilderness echoes our own. My name is Elias Mebeki, a wildlife conservationist working in Tsavo National Park, a land where the sun burns not just the skin, but the very soul of everything it touches. For 6 long years, I have lived among the elephants. I know every footprint, every scar, every echo of their calls that roll across the endless grasslands. Every morning, when their low, thunderous rumbles rise with the dawn, I feel as though life begins anew. But that morning was different. The flamingos scattered from the old lake in a panic. Herds of antelope darted through the dry acacia brush, their hooves silent with fear. Then came a sharp, hollow crack that froze my blood. The sound of a rifle. Nia, my colleague and closest friend, looked at me. Her sharp eyes said everything before she spoke. We jumped into the jeep and sped west, dust erupting behind us like fire. When we arrived, my heart sank. Lying beside a cluster of thorn trees was a massive elephant, her gray hide stained dark with blood. One of her tusks had been brutally sawed off. I knew her instantly. Mama Keto. She was the matriarch of Tsavo's largest herd, a legend among the rangers. She had led her family through droughts, protected newborns from lions, and crossed rivers swollen with death. I knelt beside her. She was breathing, shallow but alive. Her eyes met mine, eyes filled with pain, but not fear. "We'll save you, Mama Keto," I whispered, though deep down I knew how heavy that promise was, as heavy as an oath carved into stone. We loaded her onto the rescue truck, Nia clutching the bandages, I holding the water hose steady, and young Kofi, our mechanic, keeping the engine alive through the desert heat. All the way back to the station, I could hear only her heart, slow, labored, and the whisper of the wind across the plain, a wind that seemed to mourn. But when we neared the Moringa Conservation Station, something felt wrong. The gate was wide open. Inside, the yard was crawling with men in military fatigues, loading wooden crates onto trucks. I froze. I recognized the stenciled symbols on the boxes. Ivory shipments. We had been betrayed. I ducked behind the truck, signaled to Nia to stay low. Through the blur of dust and shouting, I saw Commander Moringa, the head of our station, standing tall, directing the men like a merchant overseeing his harvest. I stepped out, fury boiling inside me. "What are you doing, Moringa?" He turned, his face expressionless, his voice calm and cold. "Elias, you still don't understand. These animals don't feed our people. Money does, and ivory brings money." My fist tightened. "You're murdering a generation of sentient beings." He shrugged. "And you're murdering yourself by standing against us." That was when I understood. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a network, powerful, ruthless, international. That night, I sat beside Nia under the dim light of our lab. Between us lay the crate of confiscated tusks, each one cold, heavy, and still slick with blood. Nia spoke softly. "We can't let this continue, Elias." I nodded. My voice cracked as I said, "We won't. We'll get Mama Keto out, whatever it takes." Before dawn, while the guards were still half asleep, we moved. Nia cut the power. Kofi jammed the gates. I slipped into the pen. Mama Keto was still alive. Barely. When I whispered her name, her ears flicked, her eyes opened, and she tried to rise. "Easy, girl. We're going home." The metal door groaned as it opened. She lifted her trunk and trumpeted, a sound so deep it shook the earth. And then she charged forward. We ran beside her as the alarm blared, gunshots cracked through the morning air. Kofi tossed smoke grenades behind us. The world turned gray and red and deafening. Through the haze, I saw her, that colossal figure, lumbering into the wild, her silhouette merging with the rising sun. At that moment, I knew we had crossed a line. From now on, we were not saviors. We were fugitives. The sun had not yet risen when we reached the old riverbed. Mama Keto's massive frame trudged through the shallows, her wounds raw and glistening. Every step left a trail of blood in the sand, each drop a silent accusation against humanity. I wanted to stop and rest, but we couldn't. Behind us, the sound of engines rumbled faintly, distant but closing. Naya glanced at me, her face streaked with sweat and dust. "They're tracking us." "Let them," I said, tightening my grip on the tranquilizer rifle. "They'll never find her in the open." Because ahead of us stretched the Chulu Hills, a labyrinth of stone, dust, and thorn trees, a sanctuary where even poachers feared to go. We reached a narrow gorge by midday. Kofi worked quickly, setting up camouflaged nets and digging a shallow trench where Mama Keto could rest. I mixed antibiotics in a bucket of water and poured it gently over her wounds. She flinched, then let out a low, trembling rumble that vibrated through my chest. "She's tougher than we thought," Naya said softly. "She's a matriarch. They always are." For a moment, silence hung over us, the kind of silence only the wild can make, vast and alive. Then Kofi pointed toward the ridge. "Look!" A column of black smoke rose from the direction of Moringa Station. My stomach turned. They were burning the evidence, our research, our files, everything we had worked for. "They're covering their tracks," Naya murmured. "No, they're preparing for war." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire, listening to the distant cries of hyenas. The flames danced against the red earth, and every crack of wood felt like a heartbeat, the echo of something ancient, something dying. I took out my recorder, an old, dented device I'd used to document wildlife sounds. Day 1. Mama Keto was alive, wounded. We're fugitives now. The station is compromised. Moringa is working with ivory traffickers. If anyone finds this, know that the elephants are not the monsters. We are. When I looked up, Naya was watching me. "You really think anyone will listen to that?" she asked. "Maybe not now, but someday someone will." She smiled faintly. "You sound like your father." Her words pierced me. My father had been a ranger too, killed by poachers when I was 12. I'd promised myself, standing over his grave, that I would never let greed silence the wilderness again. Now, sitting in the dark, I wasn't sure if I was keeping that promise or slowly breaking it. At dawn, the sound of helicopters shattered the air.
We scrambled to hide under the nets. The ground trembled as two dark green choppers swept low over the gorge, their searchlights cutting through the mist. Mama Quito shifted uneasily. I pressed a hand to her trunk. "Stay still, girl, please." The chopper circled once, twice, then veered away. We stayed hidden until the sound faded completely. When we finally emerged, my heart was still racing. Naya wiped her brow. "They're not stopping." "Neither will we," I said. "We'll take her to the sanctuary at Ambosi. The rangers there still follow the old code." Kofi frowned. "That's over 200 kilometers away. Through open savanna." "Then we move at night." The journey was brutal. Every night we guided Mama Quito under moonlight, avoiding villages and roads. We slept little, ate less. Naya's hands were blistered from handling the ropes, Kofi's boots were torn. Yet somehow, Mama Quito kept moving, slow, deliberate, like she understood we were fighting for her freedom. Once, as the sun bled over the horizon, I walked beside her and rested my hand against her flank. I could feel her heartbeat, strong, steady, defiant. "You've lost so much, but you're still here. Maybe that's what hope really is." She lifted her trunk, brushed it gently against my shoulder, and in that moment, the world felt whole again. Just for a breath. 2 nights later, we reached the salt flats near Oldonio. The moon reflected off the pale earth like water. We were crossing silently when Naya froze. "Elias," she hissed, "look." Out of the darkness, headlights flared. 3 trucks, approaching fast. "Poachers!" "Get down!" Bullets ripped through the night. One struck the ground near my feet, another clipped Kofi's shoulder. He grunted, stumbled, but stayed upright. I fired back, tranquilizer darts, useless against men, but enough to make them hesitate. Mama Quito trumpeted, her cry echoing across the flats like thunder. Then, with terrifying grace, she charged. The lead truck swerved, tires screeching. She slammed into the truck, flipping it on its side like a child's toy. The others veered away in panic, engines howling into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Kofi sank to his knees, clutching his arm. I ran to him, pressing cloth against the wound. "You'll be fine. You're fine." He smiled weakly. "She saved us." I turned to where Mama Quito stood, massive, trembling, her trunk raised toward the stars. "No," I said softly. "We saved each other." By dawn, we buried the bodies of the poachers and burned the wreckage. There was no triumph in it, only exhaustion. When the sun rose over the horizon, I looked at the line of mountains in the distance. Beyond them lay Ambosi. Hope. But I also knew the men from Moringa wouldn't stop. The ivory trade had long arms and longer memories. And somewhere, deep in my chest, I began to feel the weight of something darker, a truth that would soon tear everything apart.
We reached the edge of the Amboseli Basin 3 nights later. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, though the sky had been dry for weeks. Ahead of us, the land flattened into a vast plain of dust and whispering grass, where the silhouettes of elephants sometimes shimmered like ghosts at dusk. Mama Quito walked slower now. Her wound had begun to fester despite all our efforts. Each step she took left a darker stain on the sand. Nia's eyes never left her. Every few minutes, she touched the elephant's flank gently, whispering something I couldn't hear. "She won't make it much farther," Kofi said quietly as we stopped near an acacia grove.
She will, I replied, perhaps more to myself than to him. She has to. We couldn't let her die. That after all we had lost. That night, lightning flickered over the horizon, turning the clouds into pale skeletons of light. I sat apart from the others, sharpening my knife just for the rhythm of it. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle in the grass felt like an enemy, creeping closer. When the first drops of rain fell, they smelled of iron and dust, the scent of rebirth and death intertwined. Mama Kita lifted her trunk and trumpeted weakly, as if calling to the sky for mercy. You feel it too, don't you? The world changing around us, but not for the better. I thought of Moringa, of the crates marked for export, of the men who had once called themselves conservationists, but were now merchants of death. And I thought of the silence that had kept them safe for so long. Silence had always been the true killer. By dawn, the rain had stopped. We continued moving south, using dry riverbeds as our path. The closer we came to Amboseli, the more I began to notice signs of pursuit. Tire tracks, cigarette butts, and once the carcass of a vulture with a bullet through its chest. They're close, Nia said, scanning the horizon. Let them come, I muttered. They'll find we're not running anymore. Still, I knew the truth. 3 people and 1 injured elephant couldn't fight an army. When the sun was high, we took shelter in a ravine. I set up my old radio, hoping to catch a signal from the sanctuary. After several minutes of static, a voice broke through. Faint, male, hurried. Ambo Base calling. Elias, is that you? Yes, this is Elias Mbeki. We're bringing in a wounded elephant, female, large matriarch. We need extraction and medical support. There was a pause. Then the voice returned, lower, wary. Mbeki, we heard about Moringa. You're in trouble. The government's issued a warrant. Says you stole ivory and killed 2 men. My blood turned to ice. That's a lie. They were poachers, smugglers. Maybe, but orders are orders. I'll see what I can do, but be careful who you trust. Some of us still believe you, not all. The line went dead. For hours, I sat there staring at the radio. They had turned us into criminals. The system we served, the one built to protect life, had branded us as enemies of it. What did they say? Nia asked finally. That we're alone. Her face tightened, but she nodded. Then we keep moving. We walked through the afternoon heat. The land shimmered like molten glass. Mama Kito's breath came in ragged bursts. Her eyes were clouded with exhaustion. Still, she pressed forward, trunk swaying with stubborn dignity. At one point, Kofi stumbled and nearly fell. I caught him. His wound had worsened, the bandage soaked with blood. You need rest. He does too, he said, nodding toward the elephant. But she's not stopping, is she? We shared a grim smile. In that moment, I realized what she had become to us. Not a rescue mission, not a symbol, but our mirror. We were all wounded, all carrying pain too deep to speak. And yet, we kept walking. By evening, thunder rolled again. The wind carried the smell of smoke, not from firewood, but from engines. They were close now. Kofi, I said, get the drone ready. He unpacked our last functioning reconnaissance drone, launched it into the darkening sky. Its screen flickered, showing a convoy of vehicles less than 5 kilometers behind us. 3 trucks, 1 hopper. Nia's jaw tightened. They won't stop until we're all dead. Then we make our stand here, I said. We positioned ourselves on the high ridge of the ravine. The storm gathered over us like a living thing. The first truck appeared through the rain, headlights cutting through the dark. Wait, I whispered. When the convoy reached the base, I gave the signal. Kofi detonated the charges. Not explosives, but smoke bombs filled with cayenne and elephant dung. The wind turned the air into a choking fog. Men shouted, coughing, firing blindly. Mama Kita roared, her voice booming like thunder. Then, despite her wounds, she charged. Her massive body struck one of the trucks, sending it crashing into another. Bullets sparked off her hide. She screamed, a sound so raw it tore through the storm. Nia screamed too, firing flares to blind the shooters. I grabbed my rifle, but a figure emerged through the smoke. Commander Moringa himself. "It ends here, Elias." "You betrayed everything we stood for," I roared back. "No, Elias. I just stopped pretending." He raised his gun. Before I could move, a shadow passed between us. Mama Kita. She swung her trunk with the strength of the earth itself, striking Moringa's truck. The impact sent him sprawling into the mud. But a shot rang out. Mama Kita staggered. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Then she fell to her knees, the rain washing her blood into the dust. "No!" I ran to her, dropping beside her massive head. Her eye, the same calm, ancient eye, found mine. "You're free," I whispered. "You made it." Her breathing slowed. One final rumble rolled through her chest, fading into silence. And then she was gone. The storm broke completely. The poachers fled. Moringa's body lay twisted among the wreckage. Nia collapsed beside me, sobbing. Kofi sat wordless, rain mixing with the blood on his arm. I pressed my forehead against Mama Kito's trunk. It was still warm. "You gave everything, and all we could do was bear witness." Thunder echoed across the plains, carrying her spirit into the endless dark, a sound that was not defeat, but remembrance. The price of silence had been paid in full.
The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It fell over the plains, washing the blood from the earth, swallowing the tracks, erasing every sign that we had ever been there. Mama Kito's body lay beneath an acacia tree where we buried her. The ground was soft from the storm. We covered her with soil, stones, and branches until only the curve of her tusk-shaped grave remained visible. When it was done, none of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than grief. It was the weight of the world we had failed to save. Nia placed a small carved elephant on the mound, something her grandmother had given her. "She'll walk with the spirits now," she whispered. Kofi stood beside her, pale but steady, his wounded arm wrapped in blood-stained cloth. "She was more human than the men who killed her," he said. I wanted to speak, but my voice refused. All I could do was bow my head and listen to the soft hum of insects, to the distant rumble of thunder, to the heartbeat of the land itself. When the sky cleared on the 4th day, we began walking again, not toward Amboseli, but back north. "We can't go back," Nia said quietly. "They'll arrest us, or worse." "I'm not going back. I'm going home." She frowned. "Savo?" I nodded. Someone has to finish what she started. The journey took a week.
The savannah was still scarred from the poachers' convoys. Churned soil, burned brush, carcasses left to rot. But the wilderness endures, always. We saw elephants again, a small herd led by a young female. For a long moment, she watched us from a distance, her ears spread, trunk raised. Then she rumbled, a low, resonant call that vibrated through the air. Nia froze. "Do you hear that?" "Yes," I said softly. The sound echoed faintly, rolling through the valley like an answer. It was the same tone Mama Quito had used to call her calves. Her family had survived. We stood there for a while, watching them disappear into the tall grass. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. When we reached the outskirts of Savo, the station was gone. What remained was a blackened shell. Burnt vehicles, twisted metal, and ash. Moringa's men had destroyed everything before retreating. I walked among the ruins, my boots crunching on glass and bone. The lab where we'd cataloged years of research was nothing but soot. "All gone," Nia whispered. "Not all," I said. "Some of it's still here." I tapped my temple, and here. Kofi looked around. "What now?" I didn't have an answer. That night, we set up camp beside the wreckage. The stars shimmered above like cold fire. I took out my recorder again, the same one I had used to document our work, now cracked and water damaged. "Day 30, I said into it. "Mama Quito is gone. Moringa is dead. The ivory network still breathes, hidden beneath uniforms and titles. If anyone finds this, know that this was never about one elephant. It's about the soul of the wild and the silence that kills it." I paused. The wind rustled through the ruins like a sigh. We will not be silenced anymore. The next morning, Nia was already awake, sitting by the fire with a notebook in her hands. "I've been thinking, if the system's corrupted, we start outside it. We build our own sanctuary, a place that belongs to no government, no trade, no profit. You think that's possible?" She smiled faintly. "It has to be." Kofi trickled. "Then we'll need allies. Rangers, scientists, journalists, people who still care." I nodded slowly. "And proof, real proof, of the network, the smuggling, everything." Nia met my gaze. "Then we find it." Over the following weeks, we became ghosts. We moved through villages and markets under false names, gathering whispers, following trails of ivory and money. The corruption ran deeper than we'd imagined. Beyond Savo, beyond Kenya, beyond Africa itself. We found forged export papers from Hong Kong, coded shipping logs from Mombasa, and lists of donors who call themselves environmental investors. Each revelation was another wound. But it also gave us purpose. At night, when exhaustion hit, I listened to the sounds of the wild, the chirp of nightjars, the laughter of hyenas, the rumbling of elephants far away. And I'd think of Mama Quito. Her spirit was in every sound, in every echo of the lost. One evening, while crossing the Nugila escarpment, we stumbled upon something unexpected. An abandoned ranger outpost hidden among the cliffs. The walls were cracked, the roof half collapsed, but it had working solar panels and a functioning radio tower. Nia's eyes lit up. This could work. We spent days cleaning, repairing, restoring. It wasn't much, but it was ours. When we finished, I painted a name above the door, using red ochre mixed with ash. Quito Base. Nia looked at it, smiling through tears. For her, I said. For all of them. That night, the three of us stood on the cliff, looking out over the endless plains. The wind carried the scent of rain again, and far below, lightning flickered over the savannah. Nia spoke softly. Do you think the world will ever change, Elias? I thought for a long time before answering. The world already has. She changed it the moment she broke those gates. The thunder rolled deep and distant, and in its echo, I swore I could hear her call once more. A promise carried on the wind. A voice that said, "Keep walking." A year passed. The world had forgotten our names. Officially, Elias Mbeki, Nia Amara, and Kofi Ade were listed as fugitives, accused of wildlife theft and murder. But out here, beyond the reach of governments and greed, we were free. Quito Base had grown from 3 exiles into a small network of believers. Rangers, veterinarians, students, even one former soldier who had turned against the very men he once protected, all found their way to us, drawn by the same quiet fire. We called ourselves the Wardens of the Wild. We lived with little, but we lived with purpose. We tracked herds, sabotaged poaching routes, exposed smugglers. Bit by bit, we became the shadow the traffickers feared, invisible, ungoverned, unstoppable. And yet, despite the victories, I still woke every night to the same sound, the echo of Mama Quito's last breath. One evening, as the sun bled across the savannah, Nia approached me on the ridge. The light caught her hair, turning it copper like the dust beneath our feet. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Listening," I replied. "To what?" "The silence between storms. It's never really silent. The world's just waiting." She smiled faintly. "You always talk like the earth's alive." "It is. We just stopped hearing it." She looked out toward the plains. "There's something you should see." She led me to the observation deck, where a young ranger was adjusting binoculars. "Movement near the western marsh," he said. Through the lens, I saw them. A herd of elephants, maybe 15 strong, crossing the open plain. At their head walked a young female with a scar behind her left ear, the same mark I'd seen on Mama Quito's oldest calf years ago. "Her daughter," I whispered. "She survived." The young ranger grinned. "And she's leading them." My throat tightened. The air suddenly felt brighter, lighter. "Then she carries her mother's fire," I said softly. That night, we celebrated. The air buzzed with laughter, drums, and the smell of roasted maize. For the first time since the escape, we allowed ourselves joy. Tofi played an old harmonica. Nia danced barefoot in the dust. Someone lit a torch and waved it like a banner. We weren't soldiers or fugitives anymore. We were witnesses, keepers of something sacred. But peace in this land never lasts. 2 weeks later, a coded message came through our secure line. It was from an ally inside the environmental ministry. He warned us that the Ivory Cartel was planning one final shipment, the largest in decades, through the port of Mombasa. If we stop this, Nia said, eyes fierce, we expose them all, the government, the generals, the brokers. And if we fail, asked Kofi, then the silence wins again, I said. There was no debate. We left that night. The operation took place under a moonless sky. We drove south in 2 battered jeeps, our radios silent, our hearts pounding. At the edge of the port, we saw the containers, stacked high, guarded by armed men. Each one bore the same code I'd seen on Moringa's crates, MK04. He's still haunting us, I murmured. Then let's finish him properly, Nia said. We split up. Kofi and I planted charges on the fuel tanks, while Nia climbed the signal tower to transmit evidence live to international networks. The world would finally see. But as I finished setting the last detonator, headlights flared, blinding white. Men shouted in Swahili. Gunfire erupted. They're on to us, Kofi yelled. Go, get Nia out. He hesitated. What about you? I'll light the fuse. He nodded once and ran. The air filled with chaos, shouting, bullets, sirens. I crawled behind a crate, pressed the detonator remote, and whispered a name. For you, Mama Keto. Then I pressed the button. A roar split the night. Flames erupted, consuming the dockyard in a storm of fire. The ivory, the crates, the lies, all turned to ash. The shockwave threw me backward. My head struck metal, and the world went black. When I woke, it was dawn. The sky was painted gold and crimson. Smoke still rose from the port, curling like incense to the heavens. Nia was kneeling beside me, face streaked with soot and tears. You did it, she said, gripping my hand. We did it, I rasped. The broadcast? Live. The whole world saw. Interpol is moving in. The trade is finished. I smiled weakly. Then it's over. She shook her head. It's never over. But today, we gave them a voice. Weeks later, international forces dismantled the cartel. Officials resigned. Arrests were made. The name Moringa became synonymous with corruption, and Keto Base became a symbol of hope. We were granted amnesty, though we refused to return to the cities. The wild was our home now, and our burden. I spend most mornings alone on the ridge, watching the herds move across the plain. The daughter of Mama Keto passes often, her calves playing in her shadow. Sometimes she lifts her trunk toward me, as if remembering. I record her voice, her calls, her rumbles, and send them across the radio waves for others to hear, to remind the world that freedom has a sound. When the sun rises over the savannah, it paints everything gold, even the scars. I think of all we've lost, all we've found, and all we still fight for. I whisper into the wind, you're still here, old girl, in every breath, in every dawn. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in that shimmering mirage of heat and light, I swear I see her, a great gray figure, walking slow and steady, forever free.
If you liked this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more great stories.